Hi guys, welcome back to the Hugh Jeffries video, and in this video I'm going to be restoring this iPhone 6s which I purchased from eBay. Internally it's a complete mess with missing screws, brackets, a busted camera, as well as some other low quality parts. The outside is also looking rough with a cracked screen, faulty touch, and a missing camera lens. I purchased this iPhone 6s for $60, advertised as a 36GB, with faulty touch and a broken camera. I received a message from the seller a few days later asking me to pay after I'd already paid. I believe this is a scam done by the seller as they marked the payment as unsent and was trying to get me to pay again. I sent him a photo of my eBay invoice and he replied saying that the email that the money was sent to wasn't actually linked to his PayPal account. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but to my knowledge you can't add an incorrect PayPal email address as eBay won't let you list the item. Either way though, he ended up sending it. After leaving the phone on the charger for a bit, the iPhone powered up but had a passcode and it wasn't responding to any forms of touch. So to test out the phone, I'm going to put a test display on this to make sure that the touch isn't a board level issue and it's just an issue with the screen itself. Upon opening the phone, I can see that there's a loose antenna. There's also a missing screw that seems to be floating around inside the phone up the top. And the screws throughout the phone seem to be quite loose. You can see here with the battery screws, just knocking them around a bit actually just knocks one of the screws right out of that plate. So I am going to disconnect the battery before proceeding, of course, to change out the display. Even though the battery does have an Apple logo, don't be fooled and think this is an original battery because it's definitely just a knockoff. If I take the display off, I can take a closer look at the connectors. They don't look damaged or anything, but that battery definitely has been replaced, as you can see with those battery adhesive tabs not being straight. The Taptic engine is also looking quite dirty, but with the test screen installed, the device now does power up and the touch is functioning, and I was able to boot into the emergency screen and just test out a little bit of the touch. After it undisabled itself, you can see that it is running iOS 11.4 or later, as it's saying unlock to use USB accessories. I'll need to reset the device to factory settings so I can get off that passcode and get into the phone. I made sure that it was iCloud unlocked when I purchased it so I would be able to reset it and get into the device. I put it through the restore process which updated it to iOS 12.1.4. I can go ahead and activate the device and activate it just fine. Now Touch ID did fail because I have my test display on it which doesn't contain the home button that's paired to this device. Opening up settings, to my amazement, this is a 128GB model. To repair this device I'm going to be needing a new battery, a load of new brackets, a new camera lens, various screws and parts, and of course a new display and waterproofing seal. Turning off the device, I can then disconnect the battery and remove my test LCD. Firstly, I'm going to be working on the housing of the device as it's missing a lot of screws, a lot of things are loose, so I'm going to fix that up as well as replace the battery. So first things first, I'll need to remove the battery adhesive tabs, and to do that I need to remove the Taptic engine first to give enough clearance to remove those tabs. Surprisingly, they came out just fine and I found another screw underneath the battery. Although this battery does have an Apple logo, it is a complete knockoff. You can see that the connector doesn't have any foam over it and it also has a little bit of a sticker or stamp on the back of it. The battery itself is completely cooked and the device lags terribly with that battery on a low percentage. The housing's also a replacement, as you can see by that little sticker, and taking a look at where that screw came from underneath that battery, it appears to have come from the volume controls and mute switch, as they're just floating around and not working. So reinstalling the missing screw and tightening up the two other screws, the mute switch and volume buttons are now functioning as they should. I'll reinstall the little cover that goes over the connector, and that's good to go. I also found this little missing piece inside the phone floating around, so I reinstalled that with some new screws. I also noticed this nut was loose, so I tightened that with the correct bit. With that now done, I could work on the camera, so I needed to remove the bracket that was holding it in. Looking at the camera, that's definitely not original as well, as it's got some weird sticker on it. Now I will be replacing this camera as the photos it produces are extremely blurry and you can't really make out what's going on. So firstly I'm going to be putting a new camera lens on. The first lens that came on here has obviously fallen off, but it looks as though someone's tried to super glue it in, and then the glue has not only spilled on the back of the phone, but it's also gone into the camera, which is what I'm believing is what destroyed the camera in the first place. After installing the camera, I noticed that the power button felt very loose. At a closer inspection, the screws are barely sitting in the device, so I'll need to remove the logic board to be able to gain access to those two screws, which I'll need to tighten up. I'll need to remove all the screws that I just tightened up or screwed in, as well as some other things like the Wi-Fi antenna and other parts to be able to remove the logic board. With all the screws removed, I can lift up the board and notice that there is a cable which I'll need to disconnect. Taking the logic board out, you can see that it has some sticker on it which says 128 gigabytes and a heap of Chinese text. What I'm now believing is this device was either refurbished or built from parts out of China. These logic boards can be found on places like AliExpress, so it wouldn't surprise me if someone built this phone themselves. You can see tightening up the screws, the power button is now clicking nice and firmly, and I can reinstall the logic board back into the iPhone. I should also mention the housing is in very good condition, probably because it's not the original to the device itself, and it's also not going to need to be replaced, which is a nice bonus for me. The housing is actually from a US device, and the entire logic board was originally from the United States. One little bit of difficulty I found throughout the installation of the logic board was this hex screw, which I couldn't get lined up enough to actually tighten into the device. I'm assuming the person who built this didn't have the correct bit and was probably why it was loose in the first place. It is missing a lot of smaller parts, like a little piece of plastic which actually goes down near the microphone which holds it in place, so I installed a new one of those with its matching screw. I also cleaned up the Taptic engine the best I could before reinstalling it into the iPhone. Using a bit of adhesive I had laying around, I could re-stick down the antenna. Now I can move on to the display itself. There's a few missing screws which I'll replace later on. I also need to take out the home button, which actually is the original and matches the phone, so I do have working Touch ID. Being careful to remove that and not rip the cable, as I won't be able to regain Touch ID if I was to break that home button and replace it with another one. And that's thanks to Apple pairing each home button to the phone itself, so you can't actually ever replace that unless it's done through Apple, as the data for that is stored on Apple's servers. After removing all the parts, I can reinstall them onto the new LCD. This is an Apple refurbished panel, which means it's an Apple LCD that's previously been cracked and had its top glass replaced with a new one, so you're going to be getting the best colors, touch, and 3D touch, which is very important in restoring a phone. They're pretty common these days, and there's many companies out there that do things like this, which is a great way of saving old panels, but as well as getting really good quality parts. And there's companies out there and people that will buy cracked iPhone screens with working touch and LCD, and they will refurbish them and then sell them on. I'm looking to try and refurbish up some of the cracked screens I have, so I think that'd be something interesting to do down in the track, as I have plenty of old and cracked LCDs. Next, I can install the battery, so I'll need to apply the new battery adhesive tabs correctly and reinstall that into the phone. Next, I'll need to install the waterproofing seal, which was missing from the phone when I first opened it. This step can be kind of annoying, as sometimes it is difficult to remove the blue protective film, as the adhesive likes to stick to it and come up with it when you remove it. With it now installed, I can install the display and its brackets. I also noticed that there was a missing screw in the logic board, so I put one in there, and everything was good to go, and I could seal up the device. The screen clicked in very tight and wasn't loose on any of the sides like it was before, and I could reinstall the SIM tray and install the two pentalobe screws in the bottom of the iPhone. The iPhone is now functioning with working touch and no cracks in the screen. I can remove the plastic film and install a tempered glass screen protector to prevent the screen from getting scratches, and we're done. So this is it, a 128GB iPhone 6s running iOS 12.1.4. A once poorly assembled iPhone with low quality components has now been restored to fully functional condition using high quality or refurbished parts. The person who owned this before me told me that they had brought it from China and had no repairs done to it. I was unable to remove the super glue residue on the back of the housing near the camera, which appears to be someone's poor attempt at reinstalling the camera lens. Everything with the phone now works flawlessly, and you can see that this is a 128GB model and not a 36GB model as advertised. When I first saw this, I thought it could either be a 16 or a 32GB, considering they both have one of those digits. I was glad that it is 128 gigs, so I'm probably going to be keeping this phone. You can see that it is a US model, as it doesn't contain any of the certification logos down the bottom found in many other iPhones from around the world. And on that note, this has been a Hugh Jeffries video. If you like what you saw, hit that subscribe button and consider checking out the restoration playlist to see more videos just like this one. Also, make sure to follow me on my social media, as I post plenty of pictures of tech and upcoming videos on there. Link for that will be down in the description. That's all for this video, and I'll catch you guys next time.